All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. And I think we may have like one of the bigger guests that maybe half of you have never even heard of before, just because of the way that they put out their content. I feel like our guest today, Jared Scheffler, Whitetail Adrenaline, is one of these guys. Either you absolutely love their content, or you're going, "Who's that? I've never heard of him." Because you have to have what is now deemed the Whitetail Adrenaline machine to play their content. So um, today we're gonna talk some hunting. We're gonna talk some hunting styles, all of that with Jared Scheffler. So how are you doing, Jared? You seem to be a lot better than when I saw you the last time.
Yeah, what was that, the second Sunday of the show?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Saturday, I missed that show, and I may have missed a full day at one other time throughout the years at the shows, but I was balled up on a couch pretty sick, and if you can hear it in my voice, I'm still not through it. So it's been through about 3 weeks. I've been pretty sick since that show. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of people think it's a 9-day show, but it's a lot more. It can be a lot. It can become a lot more than that. So, but thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and I really appreciate it. This year, you know, I killed my first deer from the ground, behind a decoy, in the most completely like haphazard fashion ever. And I thought, oh my God, I can't believe it worked. And like, I was like, "It's Whitetail Adrenaline, like I'm in Kansas. It was the whole thing. And, it was just wild. And then to watch your guys' content and what you guys have been putting out for a long time. And as Midwestern guys, we think that'll never work, or it doesn't work for us. We can never utilize that. Like for yourself, can you kind of tell us about your journey going from a kid in Wisconsin to kind of what you're doing now? How did that
Yeah.
journey unfold?
I mean, I grew up in West Central Wisconsin, up around Menominee, Wisconsin. We're just up the road about a mile. I grew up on a small dairy farm, 40, 50 cows, milking cows, old stanchion style. Uh, you know, a lot of kids got paid to help on the farm. My dad's way was you earn your keep. We're putting the food on the table and a house, a roof over your head. So, how I made a little extra money was tossing hay bales in the summer for the farmers and helping my uncle at times. He had a big beef operation about a mile away as well, but about a mile up the road was a giant public land swamp. I grew up in an area, and also that would have been an era where if you knocked on the doors, most people would let you hunt and they'd let other people hunt. And in that particular area and that time, which goes back 25 years now, you didn't really hear leased hunting and stuff outside of maybe like Buffalo County and some of the top area, those bigger areas. But I mean, it was pretty common to either just get a yes or a no. A lot of those farmers would let a lot of other people hunt, but had that big public land swamp. I think it's around 10,000 acres total. No roads going through quite a bit of it, other than one highway split it. So I grew up hunting quite a bit of that, along with just knock on doors, farmers, local farmers. The area I grew up, it wasn't really known to produce a lot of big deer, at least that particular pocket of that county. That county has gotten really good and produced some very large deer. In fact, I think maybe the biggest one in the state came out of that county this year on the western side, not so much that area where I grew up, more on the eastern side. But I'm getting a little sidetracked there. But a lot of my time was spent hunting that public land swamp. And there was some fringe areas of it that were fairly open. So I kind of developed a bit of an open type. I guess you kind of asked how that transitioned when I went more to the open grounds of Kansas, like people have seen over the years more and more. That was new in some ways, but I kind of already had some some footing laid down from over 10 years prior to that. Well, that would have been probably about 15 years prior to that. I had targeted at times certain open areas, kind of like we're button up around that big swamp. So um, that's, it kind of made that a little bit more of an easy transition. Um, in that gap, and in the earlier videos, you'll see quite a bit of like hills and bluff country of Wisconsin, and when we were targeting quite a bit of that wooded stuff. I think it was 2010 out of bullets. I used to get poison sumac real bad in the swamps. And I think on that video, it might have been regrouped though in 2010. It was right around that era. I got sumac so bad, and it wasn't the first time this had happened. My eye actually got swelled shut. And so we were having pretty good success in the bluffs and the hills and the wooded stuff. And I kind of just decided to stay the hell away from the swamps and target more of the wooded stuff, dry ground. And then that migrated kind of more to the open country shortly thereafter, and that kept ramping up. Now you do those open plains long enough, and they're cool it's like any adventure. It's exciting. It's like new territory and new. But after you've done it as long as I've done it, it does kind of lose. It takes about a day. When I get to Kansas, it's really cool for about a day, and then I don't know what you call it, just the desolate kind of prairies. That it's not as much of an adventure anymore. I kind of miss the woods, and I do think that I'll migrate back more to woods and swamps and things like that, providing I don't get sumac too bad. But I've been on prednisone many times for that kind of stuff over the years. Back then, more so. So,
And so was it always, even from when you were a kid and moving towards some of that open country, was it always kind of spot and stalk, or did you start out as any Wisconsinite would, and you were in a tree stand or anything like that?
I didn't get into a tree stand until I was 17, that I remember. I maybe somebody had one along the way that I climbed into a time or two. When my dad took me out hunting, normally he didn't put me on the ground. Normally he'd look at a tree and be like, "You think you can shimmy up there and get in that crotch of that tree?" And maybe you'd have a tree peg or 2 or 3 in your pocket. There was never any like 10 or 12 tree pegs that I ever remember being in the pocket. But you'd kind of go into the woods, with my dad and have 1, 2, 3 tree pegs. I mean, he was very low key, very in and out of different pockets and different places. So I think that kind of ingrained in me, that very like nomadic, if you didn't see something, he didn't generally come back the next day to see if something else showed up. It was like pull the plug or try a different area of that, maybe 300 yards away, or maybe you go to some other location entirely. Now my dad did he was a good storyteller when it came to all of his hunting experience. So I got to hear at times when he was bow hunting and he would be on the ground, and that really intrigued me. All of our gun hunting for the most part was done on the ground, other than out in that swamp. Quite often we'd climb up a cedar tamarack way up there, get above everything. And then you had the tag elders there, and there were some different pockets in that swamp where you'd use the pressure from the public land parking lots, and you trek back in there opening day, generally get climbed up a tamarack up there. In fact, one time I was up 135 feet in the gun. It was shotgun only in that particular county back then. I had an 870 Wingmaster, which I still have. And I had a Leupold VX, Very X2, before they changed the name VX2. Well, I was sitting there, and I don't know, probably about an hour into the day, the branch it was hanging on by the gunsling gave way, and the whole gun went down to the ground. It hit right on the top of that scope. And I guess as a testament to at least their scopes back then, it broke off. The shotgun mount had 2 pins through it, and it completely sheared off the front pin. That impact of the scope hit so hard it was flat on the top. And I and the 3/16 inch thick. That's what it was. I remembered it. I measured it. It was a big, thick piece of steel plate on the side of the gun, was also all bent from that impact. And I put it on the steel anvil in the shop and smashed it back to somewhat flat, got a couple pins, threw it in there, threw that damn scope on, and I'll be damned if it wasn't just fine. It held and everything. I think it was like 6 inches high, but I mean, I've considered, but it held a group and very little adjustment. And it was right back on. So I know we're not here to talk about gun hunting or whatnot, but a lot of the gun hunting was done on the ground. The bow hunting, I remember around that age of 16 when I had my driver's license. That's when I really started hunting deer more on the ground with a bow. I know I did it at times. Like, it's going back a long time. Well, I remember before I had my driver's license, me and cousin Jim doing an operation, and I was filming. Or maybe I wasn't filming quite then, but for whatever reason, I was hanging back. I think maybe I was doing the calling. We knew we had headed off a big buck. He had seen a big buck. So I mean, there was some of this whitetail adrenaline ground hunting even way back then. I remember I didn't have a driver's license yet. So that would have had to be, I think it was the year before I got it. It had to be before I was 16. But he had to come pick me up in his Blazer. So I do remember, handfuls of different situations like that, but more of the ground hunting kicked in with me when I turned 16. So.
And where did like, you kind of gave a little foreshadowing of like, okay, that's how you're doing this with a camera, some of the calling, some of the heading this buck off. But where is the origin of Whitetail Adrenaline? Like, at what point did it click for you and said, okay, this is what I'm going to do?
It had been in my head for quite a while in my early teenage years. I knew in Wisconsin back then you had to be 12 before you started deer hunting. And I was so fascinated. I think looking back on it, I was on that farm so much back then. And I mean, if you were off the farm, it was basically you better be fishing or hunting. That was kind of like your free time. And I did a lot of fishing too, but hunting and hearing my dad's stories, I really got captivated mainly by deer hunting. Although I did start doing some turkey hunting right then when I turned 12. I was so captivated by it that I just kind of deep down felt like that's where I wanted to take my life someday. I got very heavily involved in archery back then. I was rolling around starting a sports shop. I was engineering from scratch, drop away arrow rests. That was 20 years ago. I think there was only, I want to say, Trophy Taker and one other on the market. I still got my original prototype. I had it redesigned by the time it was complete into something that's not on the market today. So engineering was another one. Engineering archery products, that was going to be another. But the filming hunts, that kept me out in the field, I thought. And I kind of through high school, right in that, when I built that drop away arrow rest and kind of was toying around with, do I want to pursue a career in engineering? Well, I was 16 then. I really loved engineering and making things, but I would have had to fund my entire college forward. We didn't grow up with, I mean, that's just the way it was going to be. So I didn't have the capital to do that. And I also only did good in school in things I was very interested in, and I barely passed in things that I wasn't. So I knew that wasn't probably, that's just the way I'm wired. I knew that wasn't probably going to suit me too well if I would go to college. And then the archery shop. So I worked at a sports shop at 17, an archery shop. That was actually my first job off the farm. First job non-farm related. I also worked for other farmers, but my first non-farm working job was setting up the bows at this archery shop. It was a small archery shop. It was a Matthews dealer, and they were revamping things there. And so I stepped into that job. I knew archery very, very far along for my age back then. I mean, today it's pretty easy to get up to speed with all the archery information out there and everything. But I probably set up 95% of the bows out of that shop, 100% of them for probably the first year. And then they had a new manager they hired who ended up eventually buying the place. But he stepped in and really took that shop to new levels. And we started to get busier and busier at that shop. But by the time I think that would have been about 19. I think I was 19 then. So I had been there 2 years. And it kind of hit me. All my time was getting spent in the sports shop. And also leading up to that, I kind of realized I didn't want to own my own sports shop. I realized I didn't want to own my own sports shop because I didn't want to be cooped in it. But before I realized I didn't want to do that, I realized in my later high school years, around that age of 17, when I landed that shop or that job at that shop, I realized I wasn't going to have the capital for that either, much like college. So filming really was I guess, financially the easiest way for me to, and I did feel like that was more what I was best suited for, at least at that era of my life. I got my first video camera. It's actually the first thing I really ever purchased on my own, outside of small little things, $30 here, but it was $1,852 or $53, I believe. Best Buy, 18 months, 0% financing. My grandmother had to co-sign for it, and I made the payments, but I did that when I was 16. So that's where my filming career started.
And so at that time, there's, I mean, what year are we talking here?
That would have been 20 years ago. So that would have been, well, no, that would have been 2000 and, excuse me, I'm not doing my math right. I was 16, so it would have been 2001. Yeah, I
So,
was going. I was doing the reverse, and so I was born in '85. So at 16, it would have been 2001.
so we're not like in the height of any sort of YouTube. We've got the, TV, like our
Yep.
Sportsman's Channel or Outdoor Channel. And
Yep.
then we've got, the Roger Ragland, Dan Fitzgerald. We've got the, Monster Buck 7, Real Tree. We've got all of that sort of stuff from the videos, the VHSs that you'd go down and rent and
Right.
wear out. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
where did you find your inspiration, or like, cause how did you decide, okay, and you're like, now this is the only financially viable way to do it. Now, where are you getting your tips and tricks and pointers?
Oh, as far
Who
as
are
how
your
to
goals?
film, as far as how to film.
Yeah. Film and like that it's a viable option, right?
Well, growing up, we'd sometimes go to like Mr. Movies, it was called, in our town, where you'd walk in there. This is old school, so all these young generations, they would find this comical now, but if you wanted to watch a movie or a hunting film back then, before the outdoor channels and things, you went to the movie store, and you went to the movie rental store, or like to Fleet Farm or one of these retailers, and bought the hunting video, or you went to like Mr. Movies and rented the hunting video. And my dad rented quite a few like Real Tree videos, Monster Bucks. I mean, I watched a lot of those. For some reason, Dan Fitzgerald, I never remember watching any videos from Dan Fitzgerald, which, as Tanner came into the picture over the last few years, he talks a lot about Dan Fitzgerald, and a lot of his stuff is kind of like this rowdy. Now, Roger Ragland, he was one. I remember watching Noel Feather back then on those early Monster Bucks videos, the Drurys, the Kiskies, that came around, I think, a little bit late. I think I was into my teenage days, I think, when those videos came out. And I'm sure I'm missing some within there. Um, and then you've had the outdoor channel kind of kicking in those late 90s, early 2000s, as I remember it anyway.
Y-
Um,
Yeah. So what in that like inspired you? Or, I mean, because now you've got like, you can go to the film to hunt school, there, I mean, there's a career path for this. You can go to the community college and take video editing courses and stuff like that. So how did that all work from the dairy farm to the
yeah,
editing bay, right?
yeah, because I didn't even have a computer at all uh, until 2004. I was out of the house, so that would have been, yeah, well, 20 years ago. So I would have been 19 when I got my first actual computer. Otherwise, I did a little bit of editing in high school. Um, Sorry, I don't know how to turn that ding off. I did a little bit of editing on the high school computers, but very, very low level stuff there. Um, I don't know. When I got that first video camera when I was 16, it was like, cool, I got this camera. And you just go out and you'd film your buddies. And we filmed a lot of turkey hunting. I did record something pretty cool on that very first tape. Um, that is kind of a cool story looking back on it. But I didn't know anything about producing a storyline. I just knew like, oh, there's a turkey, let's film it, or I mean, a lot of my earlier footage was more like wildlife footage other than like turkey hunting and deer hunting. But I mean, I always had that camera with and was filming this, but no storyline to it really. Um, and then I bought my first, so I decided to leave the archery shop. That would have been when I was 19. And I decided to get a night shift factory. There was a really good paying job at this furniture factory. And I decided to take that. And I kind of set it in my head 4 years, I'm going to work there. And I'm going to bank up as much money as I can in those 4 years. And I'm going to pursue this filming. And that's kind of what I had in my head. And I liked the night shift because then it left me with the day to do what I wanted. When it came to hunting, right? Um, so I bought my first real camera in '04 when I bought that when I call a real camera was a Canon XL2. And that was a bigger it took the mini DV tapes. The juries were running XL1S's and the XL2 came out and I quickly got it. And I was like, in my mind, I was like, oh, cool. I got that, the camera that was the predecessor of what they were, as a kid or a young guy, you're like, okay, I got the real equipment to do this now. Right. But I still knew nothing about a storyline. And Dan Wachurek, who was on the first Dream season, he happened to live about, I don't know, 15 minutes from where I lived. And I met him through a mutual friend. And I think they were into season 2 of Dream season, or maybe it was only he did that first one, but he had worked with Dreams for a number of years and was on some of those other videos. And he's the one, I'll never forget it when he said, well, you got this camera and this footage, but you're going to have to tell a story, And I was like, huh, like a light bulb, like, yeah, I need more than just these animal shots. Yeah. That's how green I was on it. And so I started, I didn't know what direction to really go on that. And it was 2005 fall. I kind of hooked up with a writer. He held the editor for Outdoor Life and Field and Stream, I think, for a while. From the way my memory, it was Jeff Murray. He's since passed, but he's a well-known writer and was for 30 some years in the hunting and I think fishing at times too, but more so hunting. So I filmed a couple of hunts with him in that '05. He kind of uh, taught me some different, or got my wheels turning on some different things. Like we need this shot, more the industry format. And I kind of realized I didn't like that. I didn't like that aspect of telling the story. It made sense. Like you need this shot, you need that shot, you need this shot. I didn't like the fabrication of it all. Basically how it went, you'd kill the deer and then you'd film all the follow-ups and the B-roll and everything. And it just didn't feel like my thing. And so I didn't know what to do um, after that. So 2006, I took the whole year off from filming at all. I never touched the camera. Um, and I also felt like I was getting burnt out on hunting at that same time. So that was kind of a regrounding season, I guess. And that was the season before we filmed the very first Whitetail Adrenaline video. After that season, I kind of went back to hunting more on the ground in '06, focused more on that, and did a couple of public land adventure hunts that went well. And I kind of reevaluated that season. I got the wheels back turning and clicking for me. And so when we went into the '07 season, when I say we, I mean my cousin Jim and I. Jim just was like, well, why don't we just film it and whatever happens, happens, Jared. And so that's kind of essentially, if you watch the preliminary run '07, that's what we did. I knew by that point, like I need this shot, this to tell a story to a certain degree. Like I knew I needed more of the deer footage, but I just filmed what I could on the fly. And then I ended up losing my job, getting fired at that factory. I ran a CNC router, and it was an overtime night, and it was pretty common around there to occasionally tweak the programs and speed them up. I wanted to get the hell out of there. It was an overtime night, and I sped it up and a bit on a part, and that's how I got terminated on that. But nonetheless, it was a blessing. I was just over my 4-year mark anyways, and I was really getting close to not wanting to. Yeah, I was really close to walking out anyways. And I didn't know we had already filmed preliminary run while I still worked that factory job. I just hadn't stepped into editing and producing it. That's when I got walked out of there at midnight, around midnight on that Friday overtime night, I went directly home and started editing preliminary run. And I edited that first video in, I think it was 45 or 46 days is how long it took me to produce, to edit preliminary run.
So in all of that, like, how do you over all of the years and from those beginnings to like where you're at now, stave off the kind of like industry influence? Because one of the things, like if guys have watched, the Whitetail Adrenaline, it's no sponsors, up until this year, pretty much public land, everything. And, it, one of the things is that, there's a lot of miles, there's a lot of vehicle problems, there's a lot of overhead in this thing. I mean, you got the best cameramen in the world as far as the hunting industry is concerned, right? And there's no sponsors, there's no anything, there's no camouflage. You guys do more advertisement for Walmart and Carhartt and spray paint than anything else. So like, how do you how have you stayed completely independent through the whole thing?
That I tell you that it's been tough at times. In the beginning, it was entertained to do sponsors, and for the record, the first video was a partial. It was some public, some by permission. We launched the all public land season right after that. So the season 2 is where the all public land kicks in until this latest Uncuffed. It was Jim and I's original vision to produce a all public land series and then produce a by permission series. Well, we got so ate up with the public land side of things, we never got around to producing the by permission series that was originally planned. I still have the original designs of like where we were going to head, like designed out DVD covers that, have like by permission series. It wasn't called Uncuffed, but that's essentially what it was. But so as far as sponsors go, back then I didn't know how to go about that, but I knew, well, I don't have a following yet. So who's going to sponsor me? Right? Like I have no following. I don't have a, I got my first DVD out, got it into some stores, moved some that way. Oh, I moved most of my videos through retailers that first year, which at that time, going back to '07, they didn't want to take DVDs because that's when the outdoor channel was really starting to take off, and they were sitting on all their DVDs. They were getting dusty. And so I had to work a lot of like, yeah, well, buyback programs or whatever if they didn't sell. But we had a unique enough product because back in that era, you weren't seeing public land whitetail hunting videos. You just weren't finding them. There was the Benoites, and then I later met Dan Infolt at a show. I think that was my second year, and I found out about his videos. But you just didn't find public land videos, out there like you do now. So that was one of the things that I guess retailers gave a chance with me, and probably also I was this young kid, and so we moved quite a few DVDs through the retailers, and I picked up some side jobs for a few years in there just to help keep ends meet. You know, a lot of people don't know this. I owned a couple of houses way back in my early 20s before this business. I have not owned a house since starting this business. So I do rent, but yeah, that was, after years started, I guess, getting back to the sponsor route. I knew I had no leverage. I had no following. I knew I had no following. So, and I kind of just didn't really like, in my mind, it was like, well, if you got a dozen sponsors, you got a dozen bosses. And I really didn't like how I felt that was going to contaminate my plans for producing it as real and authentic as I could. I knew that there would be limitations there of what that would hold me back. And back then, it was quite a bit tighter than it is now. They've loosened up quite a bit. And if you remember back in that era, it almost was like an infomercial. These hunts you'd watch, it was like, I shot it with this and this, and it was like, I just didn't feel like the story of the actual hunt was, and that's just kind of the way that where the industry was back then. And it's not that I was upset about that. I get that they're writing a check for X amount. They need something out of it. Fortunately, on the industry side, the consumers started, you don't really hear much about that anymore. But back in that era, people were complaining all the time about how this product's getting shoved down their throat and this product's getting shoved down their throat. And that forced the industry companies to have to kind of like, we don't want you to get too pushy with it. You're just kind of using it over the course of time. That's kind of loosened up. And now I think producers of hunting content are able to produce, even if they're sponsored, more authentic, real content. And I think, I'd most likely consider that route if I was getting into it now, because it's changed a lot. So.
And so, again, before we started recording here, I kind of outlined the things, and for you, I feel like you're 100% like in the hunting industry without having to be beholden to all of these things. But like, how does that received by the industry, quote unquote, as a whole, when you're looking at these, bow manufacturers or broadheads or anything like that, because I don't know, it just seems like on, I guess maybe the journey would be a lot different if it started 10 years later. If you were 10 years younger and you got into the game at that time when there was YouTube, when there was a little bit more freedom, all of
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. So like you, for all intents and purposes, you should be the guy that everybody that listens to this podcast knows who you are because of all the videos and all of the hard work and the many years that you've put into this. But it's like you're kind of like on the fringe of like the
Yeah.
hunting industry, right?
Right. Yeah, yeah, I'm kind of the outcast, right?
Yeah.
I've been the outcast my whole life though. I mean, uh, I got five brothers and sisters, and it's pretty common knowledge that I'm just a little bit different. Uh, that was established when I was young. So it's like an old wise man once told me. He said, "Well, you can either not like who you are. Here's your options." He's like, you can either not accept who you are and keep trying to fit in with everybody else, or you can just accept who you are and move forward with your life the way you see it. Um, so which was pretty good information. I took that in. But yeah, I'm just different. But That's the way I'm wired. I think one of the things, I haven't tried to make enemies in the industry. I didn't really, I think in the early days, I think maybe certain companies in the industry might have felt like I was, who is this guy, sponsor free? Like that was kind of my way of saying, hey, we're not shoving products down your face. But I also wasn't trying to to really trash on that. I mean, in those early videos, there might have been a couple of comments from couple of couple of the characters in there, like I shot it with my Matthews or whatever, because you remember that used to be, well, a lot of people don't know, Matthews had a huge impact on me back in my teenage years. I've loved that company the whole way through. I mean, those are funny little jokes that were in there. I don't think I ever said any, but I let it fly with another character. But deep down, I mean, that company, I did a lot of presentations on that company back in teenage years and toured the plant and you know so I didn't really set out to try to create enemies in the industry, just do my own thing the way I want to do it. And unfortunately, I mean, this is just the way it is. You don't have an industry without companies that sell products or services, right? The way I hunt and the way I do it doesn't require a lot of products or services. So therefore there's not a lot of gain, with different companies, either with how I hunt. But that's not why I do it. It's not why I hunt that way, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
I think everybody needs to, let's put it this way. If every hunter in North America started hunting as radical as what we do and targeting only public lands, it'd be a nightmare. There wouldn't be enough acreage for one. For two, the deer, everything would just be scat. You know what I mean? So you got to have balance. You need tree stand hunters. You need, private land. You need it all to balance itself out, because there's not enough public land to sustain the amount of hunters. There's not enough acreage maybe to uh, fully support the style of hunting we do either across the country. If you multiply that style of hunting times all the hunters, I mean, it'd be a chaos out there.
So
So
so over the years, from kind of like that perspective, from like your style of hunting and gaining notoriety and recognition and going to the shows and selling all the DVDs, getting all this out there and showing off your hunting style, what has the feedback been from like the people who are buying these videos? And is it just pure entertainment, or is there something that can be gained from guys watching your style of hunting? And what would those big takeaways be?
I I think well, I don't think, I know it's all of those. Because I've heard it. you know, I've heard people tell, you know, different people coming by at those shows or over the years, email, you know, or messaging on the message, you know, the comments or whatever. I had a guy in Pennsylvania last year. I can't remember how he exactly put it, but he told me, he said, I watch your videos 3 times. The first time I just kick back and entertain and laugh, or maybe it was the first time I try to understand everything that's going on. The second time I kick back and just be entertained by it. And the third time I actually like dissect every little thing that you guys are doing. So it was like, I wish I could remember exactly how he put that. It was great. Um, you know, I've had a lot of guys that have come by and they've got their wife with them and you know, he's like, it's the only hunting video she'll watch. She doesn't hunt. She loves your videos. And I mean, I had an older couple at a show last year in the Dells. I mean, that one brought me to tears, um, but yeah, she just, I think they were retired and she just, don't ever quit making these videos. I love them, and they're the only hunting videos I can watch, or I'll watch, or whatever. You know, you hear that, you know, different reports. So I mean, those reports generally are just, you know, the guy's wife's entertained by it, and what are these clowns doing in chaos? You know what I mean? I think that's that unscripted, raw, authentic. You never know what's coming around the next corner. It's interesting to somebody like that doesn't hunt. Um, you know, more on the hunting side, because we show all our mistakes and you know, not everything always makes the video, but there's plenty of mistakes and things that happen out there that get shown. We don't really hold back on that. Because of that also keeps it real. But you know, that doesn't necessarily suit certain. That's another thing. Back in the early days, I would have had to cover up a lot of that kind of stuff because it maybe wouldn't have portrayed the sponsor company the best, if that kind of makes sense. Like, you, back in that era, you didn't see deer getting missed that often and things like that. You know, a lot of the producers have since migrated to showing more of that type of content, you know, real, more really how it went down. So I guess maybe that was a long-winded answer. Maybe I never got to your answer on that, but
Well, just, you know, for a guy in Michigan like us, or, you know, who's used to hunting these swamps and
yeah.
you know, marshes and stuff like that, outside of a pure entertainment value, like what can be gained for someone who's never seen your videos from a hunting side?
Well, I think if you pay attention, you can learn a lot from them. You know, I think a lot of times people get entertained by them. Um, but I think if you watch just because it shows all those you know, mistakes along the way, but also on the format to the hunting style, it doesn't really matter if you're hunting the plains or or broken up country or big woods. You know, it doesn't really matter the format. You're going to have to, if you're going to be successful on public land, you're, a lot of acreage is going to have to get eliminated one way or the other. So on the open ground, we may do it with our eyes more so, but up in those big woods, maybe a guy runs several different cameras and is able to quickly eliminate acreage like that. You know, I mean that that applies. I don't think it really matters where you're hunting. I mean, we took this same style and applied it to elk. And you know, and most of the elks, almost, well, all that's been on the videos has been done with a gun, but we've been very successful. Although we have had a couple of hunts that didn't go very well, but we've been very successful on the elk style. And I mean, the biggest checkbox is eliminate acreage of where they're not. And generally, you know, I mean, it's pretty easy math. Usually where the hunters are is not where the animals are. Although that changes with some, you know, situations. You know, you get a lot of pressure. The deer don't have a choice. They got to learn to live with it. And you know, there's a little different strategies to that. But maybe that doesn't answer that question the best. But I mean, I learned that in the swamps growing up too. I mean, my dad was very big on that. I mean, we never stopped moving, you know. You go where up there, I mean, it was, you get away from the other hunters, you find the little pockets that other hunters are overlooking. Sometimes it might, I mean, the first big buck that I was really a part of shooting was 100 yards off the highway that split that big giant public land acreage. And you could walk in this direction for, I think it was close to 3 miles, and you could kind of do a J hook through this one, and you'd be 3 miles before you ran into a road the other way. And opening day, this 13 pointer, where was he? He was right by the highway. Why? Because all the pressure came in from the edges and drove him deep into the swamp, but close to the highway, if that kind of makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
we just popped off the side of the highway, um, and went in after him. But that was kind of ingrained on me even back then with the swamps. So
And so this year, or for the uncuffed, like
yeah,
how was that a different experience for you? Because that was cool. You guys kind of got into everything with,
yeah,
trying to get run off the land and other hunters and landowners and that
yeah.
when you were like ready, looked like you were ready to fist fight the big giant landowner on side by side. That was
That wasn't me. That was Tanner.
oh, was
Yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, where he shot the buck and then heard him say, "Hey," right?
No, 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 no. When you were like glassing that one of those big ones and the side by side came
Oh
running,
yeah,
come
yeah.
driving up and
I
you're
was
like,
thinking you
what
were
are you
talking about.
doing? Like,
I thought you were talking about the side by side with Tanner. So that was public land, and I
oh,
parked at the gate. That was state public land. That's what it was. It was a mile section, and the guy drove his side by side right out there, and apparently has rights to do that, to check his water tanks. So yeah, at first I was thrown off. I would have been thrown off if I was on private ground, but I'm out here on public ground where there's a parking lot and a gate, you know, state ground. And that happened. So yeah, but I mean, I was pretty heated when I seen him. I calmed down by the time I reached his side by side. I was like, well, you don't know till you know. You don't know what the deal is here. So it's best to just stay chill until you know.
but the whole experience of the deal with Tanner and then you guys killed, I don't know, whatever with the muzzleloaders very quickly, a few deer in a
Yeah.
couple of days, couple of hours, whatever. Well, how was that different? Because you had talked about it, but you'd been kind of enamored by the public land style for so long, and then to go and be uncuffed and door knocking and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about doing uncuffed, I think pretty much Chansey mainly in pretty much every season until we finally did uncuffed. Um it it was I'm glad we did it because public lands are beginning to get more and more pressured. So you got to show people that either can't afford ground or don't want to go that route. You got to show them more opportunities to lessen the, I mean, it's a supply and demand. Public land has gained a lot of popularity. The mentality on public land hunting has totally shifted over the last 10-15 years. I mean, when I started going to these shows, I mean, it was all depressive talk when you talked public land with people. It was, that's all I got. I got this crummy public land. That mentality, it's like it's non-existent hardly anymore. But it's all shifted. It's become the cool hype thing. And certain people, that's all they can hunt. That's all they can afford to hunt, is what's free for them to hunt. So it's good on that aspect. And then I really didn't like the way the storylines had to completely stop. Up, the deer's on private. I mean, that went on for what, 12 seasons? He's on private, can't do anything about it, you know. Or hey, there's a mega giant. Yeah, the closest public's 5 miles away. Yeah, what do this storyline stopped right there. So, there was multiple factors that led to the decision of going uncuffed, and I did wait
in that season. I recorded it with Chansey. I didn't tell him until he had already killed his in Iowa. I mean, he's pretty much good to kill a big one on public, you know, every year in Iowa, it seems. So I just let him run with that. And he dropped that 179 incher. And then I told him he can go uncuffed in Kansas. Um, but you know, and then that was a situation the season before Resurgence, he probably would have killed that buck that would have went 215, 220. He had him bedded up on land, and he went there the next year when he was uncuffed, and the lady gave him permission. So he figured he probably could have rolled up there and got permission. So I mean, there's many mega giants we probably would have been able to chase over the years. Like I said, there's multiple factors to it, but I don't regret it. And after 3 seasons of doing it, we still only have one private land bow kill. The rest are all public. You know, we in late season in Nebraska there in that season that you watched, we were able to land some uncuffed, but we tried for many days on public and just struggled. Whereas the year before I killed two in I think about a week out there in Nebraska on public, you know, decent public land Nebraska deer. But you know, it shows good opportunities, different perspectives. So I like it. I don't see I don't think we're gonna go back to just all public land. I don't really see that because most of it still is public land. So
And then what's been the feedback from, you know, because anytime, I mean, I guess it would be different if you instead of being no sponsor, you went to, you know, NASCAR of the hunting industry, you'd probably get a little bit more pushback than going, you know, hunting private land also. But, you know, was there any pushback from the fans from the
no,
consumer?
I haven't heard of one. I think when people once people realized uncuffed was coming, but before the product came, I do think I remember reading some different comments occasionally in there that I think was a little bit negative. Not necessarily wrong of them that posted. It wasn't like anything bad, but you know, like, oh yeah, they're breaking or whatever. I think there was maybe some comments, but since the products come out, no, I haven't heard any. Um, as far as that goes, as far as sponsors go, as long as I could keep the content exactly what it is and produce the stories to the truly authentic, you know, and I didn't have to, you know, and nothing really changed there. I don't think I'd see any pushback on that either. You know, if all of a sudden, you know, people heard we got 10 sponsors, you know, like let's just go say I decided I'm going to work with a bunch of companies and do a bunch of sponsors. Uh, yeah, there'd probably be some initial, but if the content was still produced no different, then I think that would probably all phase out, you know. So I'm not you know, I haven't been entertaining that. I certainly wouldn't rule it out down the road, but it's not anything I've been entertaining. I want to keep it sponsor free as long as I can, you know.
In,
You know, there's a couple companies, you know, I use optics a lot. So Vortex, they've been gracious enough to get me some of those. Normally I wouldn't take, you know, free product even. I didn't for a long time. You know, and they produce a great product and I use glass a lot. I don't have to talk about it. I don't have to, you know, same thing. I bought Grizzly Stick arrows for 7 years, I think. And I really kicked my longbow shooting up privately here for the last few years, um, to where I shoot a lot of arrows and stuff. And um, so you know, that's what I was going to buy anyways. And that's what I had ran for 7 years. So, you know, the last, what, 1 or 2 years. Yeah, that's been product. Otherwise I fully paid for all that stuff for years, you know? So I don't consider that a sponsorship. If there's not a dollar coming in and I don't have to, you know, talk about it and change my production and everything, that's where I draw the, you know, the line on that. So
Sure. And now you've mentioned a bunch of names, Chansey, Tanner,
Yeah.
cousin Jim, all that stuff. Where do these cast of characters come from? Like, how do you, what's the Whitetail Adrenaline recruiting process?
Well, cousin Jim, obviously he's a cousin of mine, and we did a ton of hunting and fishing together back in the teenage days, and he grew up, his mom and dad had a farm, actually the original farm my dad grew up on, a small dairy farm. And that was probably 15 minutes. Well, directly on the other side of that public land swamp. So I was on one side of the swamp, he was on the other, about 15 minutes apart. That's where Jim came into the picture. I met Chansey at a show, the same show I met Dan Infolt at, and he come up hitting on my blonde girlfriend at the time, and that's how I met him. That was before he knew that she was with me, but once he met me, we became really good friends and hit it off, and then I think I knew him for, well, probably 6 years, I think 5 or 6 years before he actually came on hunting. And then Shay, he reached out to me about a spotting scope that I had posted for sale, and bought that, and we kind of hit it off and did some fishing and hit it off, and that's how that came to be. And Tanner I met at a show as well. But if anybody's wondering, I'm charactered out. If you haven't noticed, I haven't done that much hunting in the last, actually not that much bow hunting in several years. I've missed a lot of bow hunting. So I'm actually Uncuffed, I think, will be the biggest production I ever produced, the one that just came out. The next one's not going to be as big, and then the next one will be smaller yet. I'm scaling things back some so I can get back out there, and I want to produce the best product I can for what I'm capable of producing. Problem with that is the more you take on, the harder it is to produce to that standard and that quality, and the harder it is to estimate on how much time it's going to be to complete it. Some things come together very quickly and easy. Other things don't. It's very challenging to, which led us into many unexpected delays on Uncuffed. So, yeah.
And you mentioned your longbow shooting, and you and I had a long conversation at the NRA show as you barely could get it out, but you were still talking through it.
Still got the voice. That was almost 3 weeks ago.
And you were talking about your style of shooting and kind of like your path through target panic and where you ended up with shooting a longbow. And one of the things that you had mentioned, and you can go into as much of it as you want with your style of shooting, but you said, like, when you pick up your bow and you're shooting, that you're training. And that was something that really kind of stuck with me, as I'm shooting my bow and I'm going through all the target panic and all the things like currently. But that you said that when you pick up your bow, it's not, I'm going out to shoot my bow, which I think is, everybody's term. Like, oh, I'm going to go shoot my bow. Like, I shot some arrows today. And you said you look at it every single time as training. So, like, how did you get to that point? And what do you mean by that?
Well, when I was out to that Pennsylvania show, that 9-day show, I went up at the end of the day. I'd go up there several times and shoot almost every night, I think, until I got sick. So for, I don't know, 5, 6 nights, but a couple of people up there randomly as I was walking there, oh, you're coming up to practice. And I heard that word practice, and I was like, I didn't say anything, but I was like, I don't even think of it like that. I don't think of it like I'm going to practice. So I break archery into three groups, not saying that, 3 main groups. The first is what most archers today, at least in North America, know, and that's what I'll call mainstream archery. It's really, really good and it's really good at certain things, and it checks the boxes really well for, I would say, most archers and most hunters. Then you've got, which most compound, that's where it gets a little bit messy, is because then you got compounds and you got traditional bows, and then you got different types of traditional bows. So most compound archers, at least with the compounds built today, are best suited with the mainstream methods of teaching. Those bows are optimized for what's taught there. Now, you don't really see too much of this anymore, although before all the educational stuff on archery came and all this information became handy, as it has over the last 10, 15 years. If you wanted to learn how to shoot a bow 20 years ago, you had to kind of get in tight with guys that were in that semi-pro or pro circuit, or get your hands on some material to get the training. And in my mind, it hasn't changed that much in at least 20 years. It's just the information's now a lot more accessible for archers. It's more refined. It's packaged a little bit easier for people to understand. It's just more refined. In that, now you go into the instinctual road on the traditional side of archery. A lot of people call that snap shooting, more of a snap shooting. You pick up the bow and you don't think, and you just, you hear terminology, grip it and rip it, and shoot, just drawbacks, burn a hole in the target and shoot. That's more what I'd call the instinctual method of archery. And you can do it with a compound bow. I mean, take Tim Wells. So it can be done. But then you've got, and those archers in that instinctual road, they're generally chasing precision accuracy. But what they're getting on the traditional bow side, usually they can draw a little bit more weight. Usually they can, here again, that's all dependent on the archer. So, but an archer that shoots that method versus the mainstream method, they're going to generally be able to pull a little bit more weight, execute their shot with a little bit more draw weight, and a little bit faster, or potentially quite a bit faster in that method of just instinctual shooting. They're giving up some precision accuracy. It's not going to be good for target archery. That's kind of your snap shooter. So in the traditional world, which I don't really fall into either group, but basically it's split. You got kind of like, I don't know what percentage of archers fall into each one, but generally you've got the instinctual guys, and they're saying, you shouldn't shoot a bow like that. And then the mainstream archers in the traditional crowd are, I've seen the battleground verbiage go back and forth there. They both kind of have different points to a certain degree. And then there's what I call, which is where I now land. So I learned mainstream archery's teaching on the compound side back when I was, that would have been when I was 17, January, right before I turned 17. That's when I would have learned that. And I think we kind of spoke a little bit about that. And I had target panic real bad. And there was a couple guys at my local archery club, Jeremy Frigo and Jeremy James, both really good shooters. I was looking at a new sight or a back tension release. I think it was a back tension release, the way my memory is. And they were the ones that told me it's only going to fix you for a little bit. And they got me on a Carter 2-shot or 1-shot. I can't remember. I always get the name wrong. I think it's the Carter 2-shot. It was produced back then. And they had custom built a hard trigger right next to that sensitive, or the real trigger. And the idea was I get my finger on, because I was so bad, I couldn't get anywhere near that trigger without slamming it. So first they started off by pulling the trigger for me. It didn't take, the first shot, it scared the shit out of me so bad. And I knew right away that what that did is that sent a message to my brain. That can't be good. You know, it concreted it. Basically what it did is it, in one shot, when they pulled that trigger, there was so much fear in me of that bow going off that there was no way that my mind couldn't accept that that can't be good. So it made it a lot easier. So they continued to pull that, I don't know, not very many times, maybe only a dozen or 15 or 20, to where I got very comfortable with the explosion of that bow going off, to where they could now pull it and it didn't scare me so bad. That first time was the worst. It always is, because I ended up breaking a lot of people. I mean, there's more to it than that, just that, but that was the first step. Then the next step was me trying to get my finger on the trigger. Couldn't do it. They got me on that Carter release where I could get my finger on the hard trigger that wasn't real and then slowly ease into the real one. Okay, cool. I started to be able to do that. Then they got me on a Scott little bitty goose with no hard trigger next to it. And that's where I really started to, and I ripped my bow sight off, the whole 9 yards. I did that for almost 30 days and then just focused on that trigger and that release. And the night before an archery shoot in Medford, Wisconsin, they had this indoor 3D shoot. The night before, I slapped on the sight, sighted in with everything I knew up to that point and had been programmed for. And I ended up winning the youth division. Now, it wasn't like a statewide, big competition, but I ended up winning that with, as my memory serves it, that was a Matthews Black Max, which was this world's fastest bow, had like a brace height of like 5 and some inches, if my memory serves me right. I ended up retrieving one of the Black Max 2s with a turbo cam, 50% let off. I haven't shot it since way back in the day, but I ended up retrieving. I had my hands on that bow and for a period of time. So I was able to retrieve 3 of my, I had an Ultra 2 back when I was 16. One of my buddies that I sold it to still had it. So I was able to retrieve 3 of my compounds, my Matthews compounds, over the last couple of years. I have yet to shoot them, but I have them sitting there in my room over there. So that's kind of how I got broke. And then they recommended some different books and material back then to read, where I further kind of got concreted to a certain degree, pretty good degree. I could shoot to 95, 100 yards pretty well with a hunting sight. Eventually, by the time I shot my first mature buck with a Scott Longhorn 3-finger release. I had a wrist rocket on in case, the situation wasn't right, but I shot him with a clicker at 52 yards through the heart. So, that mainstream archery is teaching. There's no secret about it in terms of how precision accurate it is. And obviously precision accuracy, once you have that, you fill the checkbox of the range very well. So it's very good at that. And then if you pair it with a compound, you get a lot of power. So on the traditional bow side, you can get that precision accuracy and you can get that range then too. But generally you give up quite a bit of power, obviously going from a compound to a traditional bow. I didn't take mainstream's methods of archery with me when I switched from a compound to a longbow, because there was other check boxes I wanted to get some higher points in, which directly correlated to ground hunting mature whitetails and getting in close quarters with them. I didn't really think snap shooting was the full answer for me, but that's mainly where I resided for about 9 years before I started really hard training in. So what I call that third group, that's trained instinct. And that requires a lot of effort and a lot of time and a lot of dedication, because you are chasing the ghosts, and the ghosts are all the faults within you, the archer. I'm not saying you, but one that's going to do that. and you can conquer them. It just takes a long time and a lot of effort. And even, even on the mainstream archery teaching side, it's no secret there to the really advanced archers. They can speed up their processes much. I mean, they're essentially training too. And the more they do it, the more they can allow the other part of the brain to automatically run that process. It just gets ingrained further, the more they consciously do it, so those really elite mainstream archers, they can speed that process up more. So they'll give up maybe a little bit of precision accuracy, but in hunt situations, it's going to come in handy to have that speed of executing the shot. So, I mean, I seen a shot that Chris B did on a video. I don't know. That was about a year ago or so. I think I saw it. I don't watch a ton of hunting content. I do like his channel. But he executed a pretty fast, pretty quick shot on an animal. And obviously he runs a lot of the mainstream teachings of archery. But I saw where he executed Drew came up pretty quick and executed that shot very well. But he's a very, he's a very trained archer.
So can you define like that trained instinct versus like a snap shooting?
Yeah, well, snap shooting generally, but not necessarily has to. A lot of times snap shooters don't really do, and not saying all don't, because some do, which would fall kind of into the trained instinct category. So a lot of snap shooters will just pick up the bow and shoot it. That's just kind of going with natural instinct, which your body can have a lot of faults in it, but you can still execute. Some archers are able to execute pretty accurate shooting with that. It just depends on the archer. Trained instinct is where you do use the conscience to train it in, but my end goal is always to have it run operationally off the other side of the mind, which I categorize as the instinct side. Some people break it down into like leading brain neurologists, one of the best ways that I like they put it is system 1, system 2. System 2 is your conscience. System 1 is everything else. That kind of keeps it clean. I mean, you can get into subconscious, unconscious, conscious, and you can go down some rabbit holes with the different nervous systems and all of that. But I like to just keep it simple when I'm explaining it, as breaking the mind into two, the conscience, and then I group everything else into the instincts on that side. But the trained instinct, it does get trained with the conscience. And my end goal is always to have it operationally run with the instincts, which I'm at the point where I can flip it like that. I can shift, very smoothly. I wouldn't even know what panic is anymore on that side of things. Now, when I was doing the snap shooting style, which everything you've seen on the videos, all the bucks I've shot with a longbow, that's all been just kind of like more natural instinct snap shooting. I never really had a physical anchor point with that though, which is pretty advantageous, because the more faults you have in the body, the more advantageous a physical anchor points is gonna have when it comes to accuracy. And I did have a lot of faults over the years in the body as a snap shooter, and I did always overbow for hunting. Specifically, I never wanted to give up my power on I never wanted the arrow to hit the deer and just not go. So and I did recognize I'm giving up a certain level of accuracy to get that, but most of my shots were happening quick with those animals in close. So, and also I shot enough animals long range, and in those early videos, you see it with the compound side. That was cool. That was cool once you were able to do that. Like, yeah, he's at 60 yards. I can cap him right now. I got all the time in the world. Actually, those shots, what I found was killing a deer at 60 yards, back in them early videos, that was easy compared to inside of 20-30. A lot of things could go wrong very quickly inside of 20-30. They're sitting out there at 60 yards and have no clue I'm there. And I'm able to, take all the time in the world to execute the shot and pull out the rangefinder and get the exact, you dial the pin in, and if you're a programmed archer, it's not really an issue. So I found, as I began ramping up the ground hunting more and more and loving getting in tight, I found that a compound bow, in my hands at least, and with that method of archery, I was really losing a lot of speed of executing the shot and versatility. Versatility meaning I didn't like how my body had to be fully upright, which is how I believe a whitetail identifies whether you're a human being or not, is generally by the head and shoulders outline. I didn't like that I had to shoot that bow that way. So, but versatility now to me in archery means is broadly whatever variable you could possibly, however your body is twisted, the more you can twist up and mangle your body and still execute a shot very well. That opens up your versatility. But if I have to have my body entirely in one position, the bow has to be exactly at this angle, I'm very low on the versatility, which doesn't serve me very well on mature whitetails, close quarters. Although sometimes it wouldn't matter. There's certain situations where it's like, this type of archery would serve me very well. That's where it's all relative. And I also, so those were the two main check boxes that I wasn't getting checked with a compound bow. And I really didn't enjoy long range killing them anymore. I liked the close range stuff. That lit me up. So range was no longer something that really, I really was focused on checking that box too much anymore. I wanted more the speed of executing the shot and the versatility with the body. That's why I kind of went down the snap shooting road. I knew from the get-go, deep down, I just knew that wasn't where I was going to end up. I just didn't know the pathway on how to get where I've eventually come to back then. Back then I didn't know the pathway. I looked into the Byron Ferguson, what he does there. And to my understanding, there's some trained stuff in there, since I've, Howard Hill, he trained in things with the body too. He'd kind of hand it over, but if something got out of line, he'd go back to setting it right in the body. He talks about that in his, his literatures there. So, to a certain degree, he may have been a snap shooter, but he most definitely trained some things in there. So, the Howard Hill is kind of an interesting one because he marked himself as the greatest archer of all time. It's kind of his coin, but he's a hot button item with some of the traditional folk today, I've noticed. But then he shot pretty heavy poundage, U bows, and it's like, what would he have been able to be possible? What would have been possible if with today's equipment in his hands? And, there are literatures where he thought a recurve was better suited for target archery for precision accuracy. He was seemed to be pretty matter of fact about that. But that's back in the early 1900s. You're talking about a century ago. What he accomplished with a bow and arrow in terms of the game he took, it's unmatched really, at least in the last century. So, I don't like to pick sides on all that stuff, but I see the bickering that occasionally go back and forth on different things. But to my understanding, he had a decent amount of trained things, at least trained in the body. So yeah, that's kind of what I do on, what I call trained instinct. That's what my end goal is to always hand it over. And what I do is quite different than what you'll find in North America in archery, I'd say. Interesting. In all these ancient literatures that I've studied of archery, I haven't found where target panic, when I'm talking ancient stuff, I haven't found where there's no knowledge of it even existing. But they weren't writing the manuals unless they were heavily training. So I don't think it really ever happened because they didn't really focus on accuracy in the beginning. They focused on highly, like the elite forces, they focused on highly training the body. Well, once you have the body highly trained, if you're focused there, accuracy is just a byproduct of it. And there is no panic anymore because no aspect of the body is overpowered by the bow. The archer is more powerful than the bow. So, and everything knows where it's going. So I think that's why they never really, I haven't found, maybe I'm missing something, but I haven't found where target, that's more of a newer age thing. I think maybe Horace Ford, forget when he wrote that book. That may have, maybe there was some some talk about, but that was more target archery. I think that's when target panic really kind of took flight and became something that, hey, this happens. I think that when so much focus on archery became accuracy, there was also a push to get accurate really quick. And I think, nothing wrong with that. I had target panic, like I said, very bad 21 years ago, 21 years ago. So, I mean, I've kind of like broke it down, and that's kind of what I've come to, I guess, is I think those ancient, well, first off, writing wasn't big back then, centuries ago. So if they were writing a manual on archery, they were very, a lot of them were like military training manuals. They were training these archers, heavily training these archers. So I think they focus so much on the body training of it that by the time, an archer comes into the picture, they're not focused on accuracy out of the gate. This is what I need to do, and they had peers above them that were well trained. Okay, if I want to get there, and they were just, that's how they were trained. I think that's why target panic wasn't really a thing.
So almost like a martial art,
Yes.
of like moving up through the belts and everything versus like what we do now is like all we got to do is check these boxes. I anchor, I have, kisser button, nose on the string, whatever. Do these things and it goes where it's supposed to. Instead, we've got the Mr. Miyagi wax on, wax off, and then when it comes down to it, it just exists.
Yes, exactly. Two completely different types. That was a good way to put it. The two oldest art forms that really exist are martial arts and archery. And I call what I do martial archery quite often because that's essentially that's what it is. If you look up the definition of martial arts, I can't say it off the top of my head, but it is exactly what I do with a bow and arrow. That's what it is really. And back in those ancient times, the measure of excellence by an archer was life and death on the battlefield. So they needed a certain level of checkbox. For one, they didn't have laser rangefinders to tell them how the range. So the calculations to be accurate was much better suited, not with the conscience, from what I've kind of gathered. So back, as best I can tell, when I got the first month I had my longbow, I kind of didn't know what, I played with 3-under, I played with split finger, I even shot thumb. So that would have been March of 2012. I didn't know anything about thumb shooting before then, but one of my buddies, lifelong buddies, his dad's from Saudi Arabia. And he turned me on these Mongolian archers on horseback. And I saw those videos and saw what they were doing and saw some potential beneficial things that that if I could implement, and that's when I discovered, oh, you can shoot a bow with a thumb. I tried a few. I don't think it was very many shots that first month of the longbow, and I was like, I think I'm gonna come back to this someday, but I've got my hands full with this new weapon and everything else, and I didn't come back to it for over a decade. And I did end up choosing split finger, although I did feel like I was maybe a little more precise accurate with 3-under. The reasons I chose split is I felt like I could speed up my shot quicker and I'd get more versatility. That's why I chose that. And that's what I ran for 9 years. Well, 9 to 10. I transitioned into thumb over a 6-month period. So I shot split and thumb for about 6 months in there. But I kind of got sidetracked a little bit, but that first month of getting that longbow, there was a lot of, how do I want to get what I want to get? And I remember exactly where I was sitting in my buddy's backyard, Scott Meska's. And I was like, I need to define what I want to get out of the bow. I've already defined with a compound that I need more in this speed of executing the shot and versatility. So I need that. I need a certain level of accuracy and a certain level of power. I'm giving up range quite a bit because I really love getting close. That was, so I was like, okay, it'd be handy to have that down the road at some point, bring that in. But that's, and when I came up with that checklist of 4 things, at that time, in order for me to be the deadliest I can be with these mature whitetails in these situations, and every situation's different. There's situations where mainstream's methods of archery would come in handy for sure, handier than this over here. But as I ran my head through a lot of the situations and the situations I saw moving forward in my hunting style and everything, I felt like more times than not, these 4 things are going to serve me best. And that's what's going to make me the most deadliest that I can be in that situation. So that's how I kind of defined it. Okay, this is what I need to get out of the bow in order for me to be the deadliest I can be with these. Now, after years later, when I got into the ancient literatures, ironically, those 4 things pretty much to a T, although they were named different to a certain degree. And then range was also included. They called them pillars. This is what, in order to be an elite archer in the military, these are the 5 pillars. There was another pillar, which was also to be the ability to be able to do all of these things and keep yourself from getting shot. So that was another pillar. Obviously, I don't have to worry about that with animals. But speed of executing the shot, they called that swift, ability to be swift. And accuracy was obviously marked as accuracy. But those, so I have since, although it's kind of the same, in order to be the deadliest archer I can be, I need to be strong in these pillars. So I have since adopted the pillars that I picked up from the ancient literatures. But basically, I mark archery in hunting. You got 50 points. You got 10 that go to accuracy, 10 that go to range, 10 that go to power, 0 to 10, right? So 0 to 10 to power, up to 10 in versatility, and up to 10 in speed of executing the shot. So the most elite would be as if you had 50, right? 50 points, 10. You're at 10 on this, 10 on this, 10 on this, 10 on this, 10 on this. Now we all know it's very easy to be just accurate with a bow, but if you can be strong simultaneously that's why it's such a long road. You are chasing the ghosts. You're conquering all all the faults within you in order to be able to be well versed, be able to set an accurate arrow in the blink of an eye with maximum power, with maximum versatility in the body, which would be more of a lot of the martial arts stuff, and then range. And those elite archers of the past, it's incredible what they were able to, but it took them years to get there. And that's conquering all those faults in the body. But it's a very long road. You put, and here's the thing, you put a compound bow in an archer's hand today, and if they've never shot a compound bow and you know how to teach them, it don't take very long to make them very high on accurate, very high on range, and very high on power, depending on, certain people are, come in at different strength levels, but you can check those 3 pillars very quickly, very easy. So mainstream archery in our era, where we don't have to live and die by it on the battlefields, it checks those 3 very quickly and very well for most archers in hunting, and obviously target archery too. These 2, not so well. But also the compound bows today are designed and optimized, for mainly those 3 too. They aren't optimized to execute a fast shot or versatile generally,
So in what you're doing now, in I think we discussed this,
we went down some rabbit holes here, huh?
Oh yeah, but in what you're doing now for, and like I say, I think we've discussed this, to a degree, but like you can't go to the bow shop and say, you know what, I'm going to shoot a, I don't know, however long your arrows are, 40-inch long arrow that's 1,000 grains, and I'm going to shoot with thumb. Like, so how, like, can you explain your bow setup and kind of how you got to that point? And especially if you're not, I mean, if you were even going to consider going down that road, what would you do?
Ooh. Well, you better love it. And you better solely love it. That's one thing. You won't find. I may start breaking some things here soon publicly with it. But you're not going to find a video of me shooting right now. And for good reason. I mean, I don't think you should teach something unless you're very far down the roads and conquer. I can still recognize they're becoming less and less faults, and they're beginning to turn into more micro faults, the little ones in the body, but they're definitely getting much more refined. You're not going to go into an archery shop and buy 39-inch arrows. 40 from the field point to the nock, if you want to go that far. You're just not gonna get those. Although there are a few manufacturers, I think Easton makes one up to 34 inches. I think Bishop Archery makes one to 35 inches, I want to say. I had to seam 2 arrows together to build mine. I got one right here. I had to seam 2 shafts together to be able to do that. And what led me down that road is I realized in studying from these ancient literatures that what they were training for use with the body, my arrows were getting shorter and shorter until full lengths were no longer. It was basically, I was on the verge of switching to thumb. So when I had a few injuries, not archery related, over a 5-year period. I got 3 fractured vertebrae in my back, and I had a weird pinched nerve thing happening in this arm. I had a handful of different things. The only injury that I've ever had from archery really is when I was starting to get healed. This was, I don't know how many years ago, 6-7 years ago, probably. Would have been 2017. I was so weak from not having shot from the pinched nerve thing and stuff that I was drawing the bow and holding it for long duration, building strength. And I tore that muscle right back there, right where it meets the spine. I wasn't even shooting. but I was drawing and holding for a long time, which is, it puts a lot of strain on your muscles. Something's got to give. So that is one injury that I did have. It is in that 5-year period, but the other ones that I had were not archery related, and I wasn't even shooting the bow for that. Anyways, getting sidetracked on that. When I stepped back in to where, okay, I'm healthy, I'm good, I'm going to start. I kind of made a decision because I had been at the snap shooting road kind of for 9 years. I never really quite got where I wanted to get with it. I started studying more of these ancient literatures, and as I began training the body, everything got longer and longer. Now, at the time, 3 years ago, I put an order in for 2 bows with the Dwyer longbows that has built my bows for quite a few years. Specifically, I was going to shoot those with a thumb. I had shot a little bit of thumb in January of 3 years ago. And that's actually when I learned about Joel Turner. One of my film guys, TC, told me, oh, Joel Turner shoots with a thumb. I didn't know TC had actually went to Joel Turner's school at one point. So now he shoots mainstream archery with a thumb, as I've kind of gathered of what he teaches. But anyways, I didn't, Dwyer, for years, he had been like a 1.5 year wait on the bows. And I wasn't sure I wanted to put a shelf with a thumb. It's optimized, although not impossible. As a right-hand shooter with a thumb, it's more ideal to shoot with the arrow on the right side, especially if you're doing martial archery, because that's where you completely control the arrow is on the right. You have no control on the left. So speed of executing the shot is going to be very slow compared to the opposite. So you shoot on the right. So, well, it come to that fall and I couldn't take it no more. I had to start going down this road. So I just put tape on the side of my bow while my other 2 were waiting. And actually, that's when I was still shooting split finger. I shot a big mule deer in September. And right after I shot that mule deer, Ethan that was filming me, he wanted to take a couple pictures of me or something at full draw or do a couple pictures for a post or something. And I cranked that thing back, and I knew my draw was getting longer, but I cranked it back. He took the picture, and that broadhead was only 1/8 of an inch from cutting my finger, and they were full lengths. And I knew that thumb gives you a longer draw, a couple inches longer, depending on the person. It'll give you, around 2 inches extra draw. So I already knew that was coming, and I had already been in contact with Garrett over at Grizzly Stick about getting me some longer shafts, which is a challenge to be able to do that. So I ended up seaming 2 together, 2 shafts together to build them this long. So yeah, that's kind of a long, I guess, discussion there on that, but that's why I built them longer, was because I was chasing what I was learning from in the ancient literatures. It wasn't the draw length I was chasing. It was the areas of the body that they taught, mainly tension. I realized the draw gets longer and longer as these, and so that's where that came from. Now, one thing I didn't think about right away initially, but the extra power you get from the bow, it substantially got to be a lot. It's, in fact, this bow right here, which is the only one in the world. I worked with a friend of mine up the road. He's built quite a few bows. This bow weighs 1.2 pounds. And when I shoot it, which is the bow I shoot all the time, it'll produce, normally I don't shoot, this has got a 500 grain head on it. Normally generally I'm shooting a 200 grain. So I'm at about 860 grains with that entire. Well, it'll shoot that close to 200 feet per second. I'd probably break 200 feet per second if I went out into the garage. I don't sit around in chrono very often, but I've hit 199. Normally I'm at the low to mid 190s feet per second. If you take a 70-pound top of the line compound at 28 to 29 inch draw and run 860 grains through it, you're knocking on the door of the power of a 70-pound compound. That's what this bow with this style of shooting is now getting me. Now, that's not why, like I said, I was just training what they taught in the body, but I didn't think about all the extra power you get. I also didn't realize how much versatility I was going to have in the shot. That was a byproduct of it as well. The balance in the body is far superior once you get everything concreted on the back end for a number of reasons. The balance, it really can't be, it can't be topped for a couple of reasons. The string is breaking the threshold of the middle of the body. So you, by default, are going to get a lot more balanced in the body. Whereas not all traditional archers, but a lot of them have a tendency to lean in, which I did for a long time too. You know, they'll lean in or tilt their head in. The string isn't even breaking the middle point of the body. So everything's out here. So once you're cranking back to here, you're so much more balanced. But you're not shooting a physical anchor point anymore with this style of shooting, which the elite ancients didn't, from anything I've gathered. But they did concrete everything so firmly in the back that's how they were able to get their accuracy back. Now, I wouldn't rule it out, but compared to mainstream's archery, I don't know as the precision accuracy on the target, can be topped with this method of archery. I don't know about that, but when we're talking about being able to send an arrow at say 70, 80, 100 yards in the blink of an eye and factor in the range of that, because you don't have a rangefinder back then in their era. That's how they found to get the highest level of accuracy in those situations. That's why they did it. That's why, the Mongolians were eventually conquered and the Mongolians were, they were very superior archers, but they were eventually conquered by archers that of a more elite force that checked those 5 pillars to a higher level.
And so with that bow, because I think that's the one that you had at the show that I drew.
Yeah, I did have it at the show. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it's, what did you say? Like a 40, 50 pound bow or something like that. But when you draw it all the way back past your ear, it's, 70 pounds or whatever at that point, right?
It's exactly 80 pounds at that full draw length of my body. So, the best way to measure draw length for this type of archery, and there's only one way to really get there, and that is if you can put the body in exactly everything where it's supposed to be without drawing any weight, and then measure that distance. That's really the only way. There's a method to find out approximately what your true draw length's going to be with this method of archery, but that's the best way that I've found to concrete that. Now, if you draw the bow and you can't do that, if you can't put the body in those areas while drawing the weight, then technically you're overbowed. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't shoot that. Here's the deal. If I stay at this poundage, that's all the stronger I'm ever going to get. So if I'm very close and I still have a little bit of, give in the body, collapse in some area, if that's going on, it's going to be advantageous for me to go up 5 to 10 pounds and shoot that some, because it's going to get that body a little bit stronger. The body won't overbuild what it needs because it's a waste, right? So a lot of ancient archers used strength bows. They had different tiers of bow weights. They'd use a strength bow to build that draw. You know, they didn't even really shoot them a lot of times. They'd just use them for drawing. And then they'd step down a notch, if that kind of makes sense. So their body was a little bit more powerful than what it needed overall. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Now, but it's got me thinking that just of a somewhat comical situation in my mind. You know, maybe this happens, maybe it doesn't. But like, so you're at the NRA show, right? And you're going up there to practice, right? And
Exercise.
yeah, and your form has to look way different than like a traditional archer. So
I'm
do you
sure.
have people coming on up and saying like, "Hey, buddy, you might want to try this," or I mean, do you have
Oh,
people comment on your form?
I didn't have a one come up this year that tried to tell, because it's really hard to, you know, once you get to the point where I'm at it, you can kind of beat me a little bit up on precision and accuracy, but if you stand there and watch hundreds of arrows go into the kill zone of a mature whitetail and not a one was way off, it's really hard to deny that, you know. And then when you see the force of the arrow, I mean, the arrows I shoot all the time and the bow I shoot all the time, if you run the kinetic energy and the momentum on that, it's over double what, say, a 50-pound recurve with a 550 grain arrow. It's over double of both of those, because it's not just the weight of the arrow, and it's not just, you know, the FOC and all that. It's the velocity too. It's the velocity times all of, you know what I mean? I mean, you know how to run the calculators on it, but I haven't really kept too much of it. You know, I don't pay too much. I haven't for years paid too much attention to all those details, but I know last summer I just, for the hell of it, what's my kinetic energy coming out of this? What's my slug momentum? I had never ran slug momentum before, ever. You know, they didn't have those calculators back when I worked in the shop, or, you know, that I remember. Kinetic energy was coming around as a thing, a measurement thing back then, the way I remember it. But I don't remember, you know, of course, the World Wide Web wasn't what it, I mean, you didn't even have social medias back then. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's hard to dispute it when you see the body in that type of motion delivering that level of force within a region, say, that big. It's hard to, you know, it's hard to challenge it on the grounds of, you can challenge it most certainly on, if you want to hit 12 rings, you know. I wouldn't choose this method of archery if I was going into target archery, you know. But going into the battle with mature whitetails that aren't going to give you a lot of time when you get in tight with them like that, it's very advantageous.
So from that, what's left for you to accomplish? Like where do you go next? You know, in this journey with you know, with archery and even with Whitetail Adrenaline, like you're sitting here in what, year 12, 13, something like that.
Yeah, well, it's year 17 of the business,
Okay.
season 14, because we had that long gap in there. Well, with uncuffed. But I've got 2 seasons in the books right now, um, to produce. You'll still see, as far as this archer, you'll still see me shooting split finger on the next one. Then you'll see me migrating. You know, the one that follows, that's, both of those are going to have some pretty radical things in, you know, not too radical, but not what I would call radical, but compared to what you would normally see, it'll be a little bit radical. But it's, even that stuff is nothing like um, what I think the future holds there. I think if I'm able to keep producing, you know, these films, I think there's there's not a doubt in my mind that there's going to be hunting with a bow like people have never seen it. I think because just because this opens up the doors to so many more possibilities. Animals that got away from me over the years, and which there'll still be some that get away, which that's what keeps it fun, right? But there's certainly situations that I wouldn't have been nearly as handicapped if I would have had this in my arsenal, what I'm doing with it now. So
And so this, both your style of hunting and your style of archery, um, how does it fare? Because the style of hunting, I think, was brought up by one of our listeners as kind of like a young man's game. There's not a lot of 60, 70-year-old men out there crawling around, going over all these hills and all this stuff. And so how does that style of archery and the style of hunting lend to the future of what you what's the retirement game for Whitetail Adrenaline?
I unless I lose some love for ground, that type of hunting, which I don't foresee happening, I don't really see it really. I think I'll do it till the day I die. I mean, the last two that I shot with a longbow, I did inside of 5 yards and I was standing up. So, I didn't, it just, and not every situation is going to allow me to do that. I've already started to think about that a couple, 3 years ago, though, as a person gets older, you can't crawl around, and do that. But this changes the game. Maybe not in every situation. I don't expect it to in every situation, but definitely the last two, I feel like I could have done if I was 70, 80 years old, but I'm not 70, 80, right? So I don't know, I mean, I'm sure, it's no secret as you get older, your body gets weaker, right? So I might not be doing it with the force of this particular bow, but I think Byron was, I don't know what he's shooting for poundage nowadays, but I think he was shooting 70 pounds into his 70s still. And I'm pretty sure Howard Hill did as well. I think his two main bows were a 65 and an 80, I want to say, or maybe it was an 85. Grandma and Grandpa is what he called them. But and you could do a lot of things as you don't have the power in your body. I mean, I like to use the power pillar. What's it do? It allows you, I can put a 2-inch broadhead, a cut on contact 2-inch broadhead on the front of this arrow, and now my lethality when the arrow hits the mark, if it's a broadside deer, let's say it's 14 inches through the animal. Well, now I'm cutting 14 by 2, not 14 by 1, versus say an inch, right? So my lethality just doubled. Now, if you go the end ways, you're multiplying quite a bit. Well, you're still double, but you're cutting way more. That's why the head on and the 1/4 2s. Well, that's partially why it's my favorite shot angle, but also because the animal has a very hard time reacting in a way that's going to put your arrow, as long as it can penetrate. It's very difficult for that animal to get its body in a spot where you can't kill it with a good head that's going to drive through. And whereas broadside is, from what I've seen, it's the most likely to fail on a percentage basis, providing you're shooting a broadhead that's not going to fall apart on you and is going to drive and cut the whole way through the animal. Broadside, it has the highest percentage of failure. It just does. And I've seen it. And if you run the math, it's the shortest cut distance through the animal. And it's also on a deer, on a whitetail. It also opens up the most common gap that a lot of archers hit on an animal, which is the pocket above the vitals on a broadside, where you can still get that on a 1/4 but you're cutting more material along the way through the animal, and it changes the angle of that. So if you study video footage, and on a front end, if you got an arrow that drives through the entire animal, you can hit them way up high, and it's going to come out between their legs on the bottom side. So you're actually, because the whole animal's body doesn't drop at the same time or the same it angles. So that's why a front end shot, if you got the equipment to do it, is the least likely to fail on recovering the animal. That's what I've kind of put together, and people think it's, there's two worlds in the broadhead world. You got your 2-inch expandable guys, and then you got your 1.125" cut on contact single bevel guys, which I've ran those for a number of years, and I always got some in my quiver. And I haven't lost a deer yet with an 1.125" single bevel. I have, since I've got this arrow force over the last couple of years, I have went bigger to almost 2 inches now. I still do keep a single bevel 1.125", 1 or 2 in my quiver for specific situations. Maybe I'm in thick weeds or things like that, or a lot of grass or something. Maybe I want that, along with a lot of FOC. I want a 500 grain head. Actually, I want one bigger than that, but for like inside of 10, because it don't matter inside of 15 yards. If I shoot this or a 200 grain point on the front, they're going to land right in here. So why not have more in case there's something in the way? There's no secret about it. The more weight you got in front of the arrow, the less deflection you're going to have on the pathway of the arrow. So it's not also an ancient archery. They had all kinds of different arrows and things for specific tasks in specific situations. That's why it's really hard to one size fits all when it comes to broadheads and arrow weights and FOCs and all those things. You can't one size fits all it. You can for this exact situation, but you can't really one size fits all it. On the manufacturer side, it makes things a hell of a lot easier if you can one size fits all it though. But like for a compound setup, an 1.5" cut on contact might sound abstract, but it is actually kind of the middle road between your 2-inch expandables and your 1.125", and it works extremely well. In fact, I haven't found anything better than that for whitetails with 70 pound compounds. I haven't found anything more lethal than that. You could go up to 2-inch cut on contact, but you're going to have a little bit higher arrow weight, so your trajectory is not going to be as high. But yeah.
So in that 1.5" range, what's your broadhead of choice then?
An 1.5". There's getting to be more, because here's what's happening. What's happening is a lot of archers over the last few years have begun to switch to more fixed blades, right? And so you're seeing more manufacturers come on the market with the fixed blades, right? But what you're seeing is that isn't 1.125" isn't always the answer either. And we'd like it to be. And for certain animals, it is the best. And that's why you can't one size fits all it. You might have somebody that's shooting a 40-pound recurve at 26-inch draw. Well, I'm not going to recommend they go shoot in a 2-inch broadhead, cut on contact. You know what I mean? That's why you just can't one size. It's easier to one size fits all with, say, a 70-pound compound. Like, oh yeah, throw this on the front and throw that. You got enough power that you can. Does that kind of make sense?
Oh yeah, 100%. And it's the age old question, right? It's like, it is the fixed blade guy versus the mechanical versus the high FOC versus the speed guy, right? I mean, it's all of your pillars. You're just picking one versus the other. You're just sacrificing one for the next. But like kind of like if you've shot a lot of animals with your setup and your 1.5" fixed blade broadhead, like what ones have performed well for you over the years with your setup.
So here's what I did is, and I've got all of my broadheads from years. I think they go back to the first mature buck. I got them in a box. I started on fixed blades, even though I was a mainstream shooter. I mean, mechanicals were more early age back then. They didn't, there was a lot of horror stories from them. So I just didn't even go down that road. I knew enough about tuning and things like that to still have pretty high precision accuracy with mainstream's archery methods, teachings on the shooting side, and then paired with a compound bow. It was fine to get good at arrow flight 60, 70 yards. I ended up for a while, and I really, really liked them. I shot Magnus, the classics that were more on the traditional. I shot those out of my compounds and killed quite a few deer with them, and I really liked them. But they always kind of chipped, and the tips were very pointy, and they'd kind of break off and curl over, and I didn't like that. I didn't like the Stinger line because it was only an inch back then. At least when I worked in the archery shop, that's all I could seem to get my hands on was 1 inch, and I still have them to this day. I eventually didn't like the tip curling. I never lost a deer with those Magnus Classics. Those were 1.125 inches. I know you're only talking about 1/8 of an inch, but I know we're only talking about 1/8 of an inch, but it was already kind of like I didn't really want to go smaller than that. But the Magnus Stinger line had the better steel in it and the bevel front. I eventually switched to the Magnus Stinger, and I loved those heads. But then I lost 2 big bucks in a row with them, both of which I felt I should have had, for surely the first one. And I ended up finding that was the first mature buck I lost. I lost one deer before that with a bow and arrow, but I count it because I did it, but I was a young kid. I bought a bow at Fleet Farm with plastic wheels, and that was my first night out with that bow. I was very green then. And there's some things I'm not going to talk about with that. But I count it, but it wasn't completely in my control. The one I'm talking about, everything was within my control. Every choice I made, everything. But with that, it was a 1/4 deer. I saw where the arrow hit. It hit midsection, halfway up, halfway down, right tight to the shoulder. I should have, in hindsight, taken him on the shoulder or right in front. But precision accuracy, I knew I could tuck it right there, tight, and I was shooting super light arrows back then, and I kind of offset it. I shot super light arrows, but then my choice to get my penetration back was that low profile single blade. I call them 1 blade heads, not 2, because you're cutting one plane. But that was kind of how I offset it. I want to keep my arrows light for trajectory and things, and I was shooting real light. But then I'd get my penetration back with that. So I was a little bit scared of hitting that shoulder, but I knew I could tuck it right there. I tucked it right there. I one-lunged the deer. I had zero blood. I jumped the deer. I gave him a couple hours, went walking in the direction he went. He had went a couple 100 yards. I jumped him. He was still alive. Gave him a few more hours, went walking in the direction, came across him after like 200-300 yards. He was still alive, still had 0 drop of blood. I was just going off of, seeing him. He caught me. I kept walking, and I kind of was on a ridge line. I went over the ridge line. I knocked another arrow. I just kept on my walk, looped back around, but the gig was up. He knew that I had seen him, and he took off out of there. And I was so baffled that this deer was still alive, actually. Because I tucked it tight. I mean, tight, and it wasn't super extreme. Like I knew the arrow had to come out in front of the hind quarter on this side. But I just, I gave him overnight. I was like, 2 jumps is enough. So I gave him overnight. Called a buddy of mine. We looked for that deer. The next day, I looked for it after that. I quit bow hunting for a week. I never found that deer. I knew it was dead. I seen where the arrow went. And I seen when I jumped him. I came home from work, working that night shift, saw a big buck, hot on a doe, got the juices all flowing. Okay, I'm ready to bow hunt again. You know, I was sick to my stomach losing this deer. Went out. I didn't get that deer. I should have, but I didn't. Another hunter blew it for me, but it got me fired up to go hunting again. So I went out hunting that night. Big 10-pointer comes in, 32, 33 yards. Thunk. Took him, you know, well, he didn't react at all to the bow, which what I learned back then, 30, 35 yards was the most dangerous range to shoot a mature whitetail at, because it's very hard to predict how much they're going to react. And he didn't react at all. And I knew I hit him like low down by the heart, but I didn't. I was just, after losing that one, I was like, I'm not even pissing around. It's night already. It's cold enough. I'll wait till morning. Went in there in the morning, blood trailed him. I don't know, 300-400 yards. Boom. Walking blood trail, then ran out of blood. Cold Stone ran out of blood. Literally within 5 yards of where I had last seen the other big one when I was trailing that one. Now I don't know what, you know, it's like, I look, I can't find no blood. It just stopped. Called my buddy down again. We looked the whole next day. Don't find, or maybe it was that day. So it's going back a long time. Whatever. We looked, couldn't, but I was pretty sure I was going to find the original deer. Like I just had that gut feeling. Like I knew I didn't jump them again. We're in the same vicinity. We're going to smell something or something. And I did find that original big buck. And my buddy was right there to see where the entrance and the exit was. Should have had a drop of blood, should have had something. Never ended up getting the second one either. So I killed a lot of deer with those heads and lost 2 in a row. And I felt like for surely the first one I should have had. Second one, you know, maybe I was an inch off from the heart or something. I did see the second one a couple weeks later out looking for a doe. Didn't get close enough to kill him, but he did make it. So that made me feel better there. But I went away from that style of broadhead. I found an expandable that was a fixed blade inch cut on contact with flipper blades. It was very poorly produced overall, but nobody else was making one. I always wished Magnus would have taken that original head and put those flipper. They're basically bleeders. They were designed on this head. They were weak enough that they'd shear off in the event you hit something. But the rest of the broadhead was junk. It was a Crimson Raptor. I shot a lot of deer with them, never lost a deer, but every broadhead was mangled and they could have built it a lot better, but nobody else was making something close. And I just was gun shy, and I couldn't find 1.5-inch heads back then. Single blade. There wasn't nearly as many options. So I then the first 5 years of the videos, I didn't actually own a bow. I shot all the compound deer I shot was with other people's bows. I didn't even own a bow. But if you know how to shoot with the mainstream methods archery, it don't really matter too much. Don't take nothing to get dialed in. You might be off a little bit from them depending on palm pressures and different things, but you're going to group arrows. So when I went to a longbow, I'm going to go back to fixed blades. I went straight to a Simmons Tiger Shark. I had discovered the Silver Flame XL, which is the head I really wanted, but it was built by German Kinetics in Germany, and he wasn't distributing them. You couldn't get your hands on them. That's the head I wanted. I went to the Simmons Tiger Shark, which was 1 9/16 actually. And I shot a few deer with them. What did I shoot? 3 or 4, something like that. Really liked him overall. I just was scared of going to the inch size. Back from my experiences back with those inch, and I never had an issue with those Magnus Stingers as far as degradation of the quality of steel or anything, just those 2 situations. there just wasn't enough cut there, in those situations. But, I found that Silver Flame XL got picked up by Grizzly Stick, and now I could get them in 2015. So that's what I bought. And I bought some Samurai 1.1/8" single bevels too. And the big Mega Giant typical I hit in the knee cap, I broke it there with that Silver Flame XL 1.5-inch cut. But I kind of, deep down, I felt like I wouldn't have made it through the shoulder. And I ended up killing that deer with the Samurai single bevel head right through the hindquarters. He was running 35, 40 yards, and the arrow blew out the other side, you know, this far. And that arrow had seen the dirt that morning when he was at 50, 60. So I never had time to sharpen it. And I was just really, really impressed with it. So I actually went to the 1.1/8" single bevels after that for a number of years. I think I kept an 1.5-inch Silver Flame XL, but the reason I went to that is because I didn't feel like I would have had enough arrow force with my current setup to drive it through the main shoulder bone or the knuckle if I had hit it. I broke his knee, but I didn't ever lose one with a single bevel 1.1/8", and I had a lot of good success with that, and I was pretty happy overall. But once I started hitting the power levels, arrow force levels that I'm hitting now, it just made complete sense to go bigger. So that was probably a long road of discussing that. But now certainly if I, you know, as I get older, if I go down in arrow force to a certain degree, my main broadhead in my quiver is going to be an 1.1/8" single bevel, I would expect. But I'm sure I'll always have one or two in my quiver for specific applications, but as long as I have enough arrow force, I'm always going to drive a bigger head. You know, my vision is no matter what I hit, drive it through the animal the entire way. If I can't do that, then I maybe consider going a little bit lower. But everybody has different. That's the thing, you know, some guys set up all their shots for broadside angles, and you know, that's why it's hard to one size fits all it. It's hard to say, well, an 1.1/8" single bevel's the best broadhead. Well, if you got enough arrow force, something that cuts twice the pathway and gets all the way through the animal, you can't deny that that's going to be, I mean, there's just no denying that. Now, okay, you're going to hit the main shoulder bone, but your 2-inch is going to stop, but your 1.1/8" single bevel is going to go through. Well, you know, that's why. But if you got a 2-inch that can do that and drive entirely through, that's why arrow force to me is so important, because in those fast action situations, the last thing you want, or that I want, is any anxiety about how much arrow force I have, because I got a split second. This animal's quarter in two. I want to just know that I have enough arrow force, and not just arrow force. You know, if you don't have a lot of arrow force, now what we were just talking about, you know, you can do different things with broadhead choices, and you know, there's a lot of different methods to get penetration. I guess I kind of went back and forth with whether it should be called power, you know, arrow force, power, penetration. And I just came back to, well, the power supply isn't in the bow or the arrow. The power supply comes from the archer. It transfers to the bow, then transfers to the arrow, then penetration happens. So that's why I kind of chose power as the official, my official, not the official, but my official name for that pillar. But it all kind of trickles down. You know, you can do things with your bow setup and, you know, bow choice. There's a lot of variables that can factor into, you know, arrow force and all that.
So I think it's super interesting to talk, and I guess I've never really looked at the, you know, the frontal or the quartering two shot as, I don't know, like physiologically as that being, you know, quote unquote more effective. You always see it, I think, like from the elk guy, saying, would you take this shot or what distance or blah, blah, blah. But never about like that lethality from like an area or from the wound channel type discussion. And with your, like, 5 pillars of archery, that can translate over. It doesn't, you don't have to have the ancient type of archery to have all of those things be relevant in our shooting. You can take that with any bow that you're shooting, all of your arrows and your setup and the way that you're shooting. But kind of circling back, we can kind of close this out here as we go with your style of hunting. So for someone, you can't necessarily just say, okay, well, you're going to take your style of shooting, but for like a spot and stalk or getting eyes on an animal, what are some things that guys can help them to expedite that journey of, maybe getting bit by the bug or becoming a little bit more successful, shorten the learning curve that you've endured?
Yeah, I mean, there's ground hunting for whitetails has picked up in popularity a lot over the last, well, especially the last 5 years. That was another thing. Years ago, you didn't see content like that. Other than what I come to find out, Dan Fitzgerald from Tanner. But it wasn't very, very common. I think when I looked into the year before we produced Regroup, which was 2010, I did a search on YouTube, just curiosity to see if like ground hunting whitetails. And there was only 1 or 2 that came up that I could find. One was Brock Lesnar stalking in on a buck. I remember that. But nonetheless, there wasn't that much out there. It's definitely gained in popularity. I have people all the time that have come to, I tried hunting on the ground. I love it. Had more encounters. I didn't get one, or maybe they got the biggest buck they ever. I've heard many different, everybody seems to get hooked by the bug once they start hunting on the ground. The easiest transition, especially if what we were just talking about, the easiest transition, if you're, a good archer with mainstreams methods, an easy transition is to set yourself up for long range situations on animals, in ground situations. And then if you get the bug to chase them closer, migrate, transition that way. Cause you're easily able, you're already strong in the archery in that department, right? The part that's difficult, or one of the difficult parts of ground hunting mature whitetails, is that close quarters game, and when things get hairy and tight, and shots got to happen, draws and shots got to happen quick, and things like that. And, so that's, I'm not recommending, I mean, everybody has to each their own. Everybody has to pick, somebody might want to go straight from hunting out of blinds and tree stands to close quarter battles. I certainly wouldn't. I mean, do what your heart desires, do what you feel, that you want to do. But an easy transition would be that, when we were talking about the pillars, the 0 to 10, that's where certain things, like speed of executing the shot, like I might be able to, well, I'll put it to you this way. I took a compound bow and I tried to see how fast I could draw and execute a shot accurately with. And as I remembered, it was about 3 seconds. That was about, and I didn't do a lot of hard training to see how fast I could get that. But with every archer's has a different level. Like some archers might be able to get that down to 2. If I would have trained hard, I maybe could have gotten it down to 2. But that would have put my points in speed of execution at a higher level. You know, it wouldn't have been at say 10, but it maybe would have taken me from, okay, let's say 0 is, you know, 6 seconds from the time I start the draw to the time I take the shot. Let's say I'm very low on those points. Like I'm not able to execute shots quickly. That's why I don't like to just, I like to have a almost like a points graph. Like, and I kind of measure when I'm training, I kind of measure like, okay, my power pillar's getting up here, you know, but I'm giving up points over here. But as you chase the faults in the body, you begin to get your points and accuracy say back. See, like with this method of archery, you don't get accuracy and range till the end. You don't, if that kind of makes sense, you don't see that coming back until you're getting things real concreted in the fault department of the body. Then now you have the speed of executing the shot, and you have the versatility, and you also have the accuracy and the power all coming together simultaneously. So in the blink of an eye, it's just say, yeah, you know, and you can't, and everything's getting processed. And then as soon as you know, you may do that for a while automatically and then realize, oh, something in the body's getting out of check. And I think that's what Howard Hill referred to in his book too. Like there's times that he had to go reset, recheck things where he doesn't really break it down in the mind, but that's what he's doing. He's using the conscious to put it back in check so it can be ran automatically. If that kind of makes sense there. But yeah, that would be an easy transition for somebody in the tree stand ground blind game that's really good with, say, well, it doesn't matter what kind of bow, but really has precision, accuracy, and range to a high pillar. My guess is most of the time those shooters have a slower execution time of their shot, not necessarily that, you know, that's not a one size fits all, but most of the time their speed of executing the shot's going to be slower. So setting yourself up further away from those animals will give you the more time to basically let your strengths come through, if that kind of makes sense, which what we're talking about there is accuracy and range.
Sure.
And then, so if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know, maybe they kind of intersected, but for me, watching, you know, some of your stuff and then going out, and last year was the first, 2 years ago was the first year I hunted with the longbow, and it's just way, I don't know if it's not easier, but it's, you got to get closer. So I feel like it was a lot more realistic from the ground than it was like in a tree. And it was like a cross between like elk hunting and everything. Like I can just sit here, but I need to close the distance. So I might as well be on the ground and see if I could sneak over there instead of, you know, just sitting here waiting, hoping, all of that stuff, because I have such a limited range. But for guys that haven't tried it, it's wild trying to hunt these deer from the ground. And, you know, like I said, I've only killed the one this year, not with the longbow, just with a compound out in Kansas. But next year is going to be the year of the longbow. So that's the ultimate plan. If you were to point someone to, you know, they'd never heard of Whitetail Adrenaline, and they're like, oh man, I gotta see what this is all about, like, where would you point them to? Which DVD set? I mean, obviously this last one is your crown jewel, but beyond that one, you know, it's uncuffed, and then what's your next baby or pet?
I mean, Defiance one is probably the next highest ranking, or right in there. Resurgence one is really good. It's got some good hunts on it. I mean, they all got special, unique things on them. You know what I mean? Special hunts and whatnot. But if you want to get, I mean, those are two very high ranking. Well, Reckoning one, I mean, that's an older video, but that we look like babies back then. But yeah, that's another great, you know, those are all bow, you know, the round ones are all bow, you know, uncuffed. I kind of grouped it all together. But those would be some some great choices there. And yeah, you know, we were talking about what you just kind of said there. You were talking about tree stand. That's another thing, you know, like certain archery methods fit certain applications better. So like from a tree stand or a ground blind, you know, I wouldn't need speed of execute and shot and versatility nearly as often. You know, certainly there might be a situation that applies, but most of the time I don't need those. That's why, you know, I don't like to get it, you know, involved in these archery battles of what methods of archery and what style, because it's very, I mean, you can break archery all the way down to the way I look at it is essentially it's the expression of oneself. That's what shooting the bow and the arrow really is. And so if you're true to what your needs are to get out of the bow, I mean, there's people that shoot the bow. I mean, you could say that I do. You know, many times I feel like I'm shooting the bow just to release and just, I love shooting alone because that's where I get to really just, nobody's watching, I get to just be free and do whatever I feel, you know. And we talked about, I'm training things in, but I'm exploring a lot of things as I go. And part of the reason I haven't spoke a ton on specifics within it is because there's many things I've concreted down that, you know, much of which I've learned from these archery literatures, but then I had to actually find out if what they wrote centuries ago, was that actually true? Did I, you know, and a lot of them do check out, but it just takes a long time to get there. So I got sidetracked again there, but I just thought I'd mention that, like you know, we talked about early on, like, well, you better love it if you're going to chase this style of archery. You better love it because you're gonna, the amount of time dedicated to get that, you know, those 5 pillars strong. I mean, it's astronomically higher than to get pretty proficient with mainstream archery paired with a compound bow, especially. And most archers and most hunters don't need any more than that. So I just don't want people to think I'm trying to get into you know, create some division there. Same thing goes. I hunt on the ground, but that doesn't mean that everybody else should, or whatever your heart desires, you know. So
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'll be controversial. I'll say it. I think everybody should try it at least once, you know, to get out there and try to spot and stalk something and, you know, fail a lot, you know, but yeah, so, um, and then, you know, I think the biggest question you have to get all the time is, you know, why can't we get this just digitally? And so if they have to go and seek you out, where can they find Whitetail Adrenaline?
so yes, for those that have been hanging in there listening, all of our content is on. We've been digital for years. DVD is digital, video, and it does require a machine, not our specific machine. It's called a DVD player. And for those younger generation, if you've got a TV, it's most likely it's got an HDMI cable or the 3 colored cables, and you plug those cables into the machine, and you got this physical disc, and you put it in, and then it plays the content. And so all of our films are on that, and then Resurgence is on digital on iTunes. It was actually the first hunting content under the movies section on iTunes that was ever on iTunes. But that's on there on iTunes and Amazon. And it's a very slow process. It's not like YouTube where I can just upload it and boom, it's there. Costs a lot of money to get it up on those digital platforms. But because we're sponsor free, I do sell my content there. I mean, I may do some things with YouTube down the road. I don't ever foresee releasing my films really on YouTube, maybe a film or a hunt or something small, but there's just way too much time and effort that goes into producing them to that level on the hunting side. And because our format's unscripted, it's just it's very time consuming to produce that. And so I can't foresee how that would ever work on YouTube, for the actual films. So that's why they're not on YouTube. And that's also why that it's not real quick for us to get them available on digital. So I'm looking into potentially offering digital direct on our website too as another option at some point, but that requires other hands and things. But it will be content people will have to purchase. That's how I'm not wired in a way where I can just kind of like, it's good enough. I have to produce it to the best of my abilities. And that's kind of why I also have to downsize them, because otherwise they get too big and they turn into these monsters. And then I'm like, well, I can't produce it because, I can't let it out the door because it's not quite at the quality it needs to be overall to make it all flow and be what it is. So I get stuck then when I get into so that's why I'm kind of scaling back, and my passion's more into the bow hunting side than the gun. So that's where we're going to be heading more with things in the future too, is not as much gun. It'll be mostly bow. So
Awesome. And so where can people buy these physical disc things?
yeah, some retailers have them. Otherwise, right on our website, whitetailadrenaline.com. Got all the films on there. There's 38 discs total. I hadn't had that number, but I counted them up the other day and I was like, how many have I actually produced here? So 38 discs, there's 14 seasons total. And some of the box sets have multiple discs in them, but 38 discs. I think 85 hours of finished unscripted raw hunting content.
And then
yeah.
I was saying, and then where are you going to be at some of these shows coming up? And then you're going to be here in Michigan. And I think there's still a handful of tickets left for that. So can you talk about like where you're going to be and then the live panel here in Michigan?
Yeah. So this weekend we're going to be at the Iowa Deer Classic in Des Moines, Iowa. And then the weekend after that, I'm coming up there to Northern Michigan to Mio, up to Ozable Outfitters up there. And that's kind of a unique event. I've never done anything quite like that. You were there last year, right? That's what you said.
Yep.
So you could probably talk a little bit more about, I don't even know exactly what I'm getting into there. Just I kind of gathered it, people get these tickets and they come there and they can ask a lot of different questions and answers, and I'll be there along with some others. I can't remember off the top of my list. Aaron Blyce.
Yeah, Aaron Blicey. And then I think maybe some of the other guys from Latitude Outdoors are going to be up there. And I would imagine that if Aaron's going to be there, there's a good bet that David Riley's going to be up there as well. So
okay. Here again, you can tell I'm not super connected with the entire industry, so it's like I get a little hazy on a couple things. So that's that, and then the weekend after that, we're going to be at a show in Columbus, Ohio, open season Sportsman's Expo, and then the weekend after that, Wisconsin Dells at the Kalahari Convention Center there for another show. That's put on by Open Season Sportsman's Expo. So busy March.
Awesome. Well, everybody make sure you go and find Jared at one of these shows. And you need to, if for nothing else, check out his arrow setup, because it is wild. Buy some stuff and keep these guys in business until they're in their 60s and 70s out there chasing whitetails. So appreciate the time tonight, Jared, and thanks for coming on.
You bet. Thanks for having me on.